All right, gang. Now let's start talking about render settings. So that first portion was basically just setting up your document, how to establish resolution, set up your camera, get all that stuff worked out. Now let's go and start doing the fun stuff. So the only areas we're going to be spending time in are in the render area. Clearly, we need to kind of dial in some settings here and walk through some of these functions that are really, really nice. And then the other area is going to be the light area. Probably not going to do too much in the light. We'll keep this demonstration really simple. I don't anticipate anyone needing to do anything too crazy, but this is where you would basically adjust your light or add additional lights and so forth. I actually have a different process for adding additional lights, and we'll talk about that in a second. So first things first, right out the gate, I like to just go ahead and render out an image. And to do so, in your render menu, where you see BPR render pass, let me go ahead and close everything here. BPR render pass, I'm going to expand that menu, and you're going to see this BPR button right here. Go ahead and just click on that and just see what you get out the bat, out the gate. So you can see I'm getting, something fairly decent. We got a pretty hard shadow. The light itself is fixated for the most part right on top. If you look down here in your GUI, this is basically telling you where that light source is coming from. That little black dot on the circle is indicating the angle at which that light is striking the object. So here you can see that that's what I'm getting. Now, let's say that that's not entirely what I want. I'm going to go here and just adjust that. I'm going to move it over to a little bit to the right. Now, those of you who are not using my UI, you can go up to the light menu, and it's the same thing here. You can just select that and just drag it around. You can see it being affected in both right here where I'm manipulating it, as well as down there in the GUI, right? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and render this out again. Let's see if this is more of the light source that I want. Yeah, that's feeling a little bit better. I much prefer that. So let's go with that for the light angle, okay? And now we're going to talk about just getting the shadows to kind of feel maybe a little softer than what's here right now. So I'm going to first go down into the render menu again. And down here where you see BPR shadow, we're going to expand that. Now the angle dictates the harshness of the shadow. If it's a low value, you're going to get a really hard shadow like what you see currently rendered. The higher you go, the softer the shadow. I would be wary on going too high. Typically, the highest I'll ever go usually is about maybe 45 or something. But for this guy, let's try something like 25. And then, of course, with the softer angle, we want to adjust the rays. Think of rays as basically the higher this number, the better quality. But there is a caveat. If you go too high with the rays, it actually starts to do a really funky, blotchy type of appearance on there. So I'm not going to go super high. I'm going to set this to something like maybe 150. That usually gives me a nice clean result. And believe it or not, I don't really mess with anything else, to be honest with you. The only other thing you may adjust is right here, the global strength for the shadow. The default setting is 0.75, and then the floor shadow strength is set to 1, so they are independent of each other. Let's just leave it as is for right now. I'm going to go ahead and render this out once more. And when you do adjust these values and make the quality better, like with any renderer, the render time is going to take a little bit longer. Hopefully, whatever computer you guys are using should be pretty efficient. ZBrush is pretty quick with the rendering. So here you can see that I'm starting to get a softer render, which I like much better. Down at the bottom, we're seeing a little bit of a cutoff, and that's just simply because of the floor. So if I move this out of the way, let's go ahead and expand that floor once more. So we'll make that grid size, just set it a little bit more. Let's go back to our custom camera. I'm going to render this out once more. And there you have it. Now it's still getting cut off there, and what I suspect is that I need to render a different angle. Sometimes you have to refresh the renderer, and then I'll go back to my camera to kind of see if it'll auto-correct itself. So let's let it render this view, and then we'll go right back to our main camera. Yeah, that's better. So now let's go back to camera 1. Render this out once more. So this video, you guys are going to definitely see me doing quite a bit of rendering. So just bear with me and be patient here. Anything that begins to take too long, I'll just start pausing the recording. There we go. Now we're getting that fall off to carry all the way through. Okay, so right now I'm liking the light angle. I'm liking the shadow softness or quality for the most part right now. So I'm going to go into my render settings and now start talking about the next aspect of stuff that I want to adjust. There's 2 ways to take an image out of ZBrush to basically work with in Photoshop or just outright present. The first is the way that I prefer to do it, which is right here under the VPR render pass, under our render button, you have these images here. Now, if I hover over these images, what you're seeing here are different passes. So right here, the shaded button is basically the render. Next to it is a depth map, which is really nice for kind of creating depth of field in Photoshop. Then I have my shadow pass. Then I have my mask. So all of these are very important, and we can add additional items as well, like subsurface if we want to. But I think for you guys, we're going to keep it very straightforward. Okay. So at this point, if I click down on this, I can basically now export that pass, that render, as a PSD file, Photoshop file, name it appropriately, and I can do the same for any of these that I press down. Depth, shadow, so forth. We're not ready just yet. I want to do a few other things before we do so, but I just want to show you how to export from there. Now, let's say, for example, you just like this image as is right here, and this is what you want. You could also go to your document menu and just simply say export. And from here, you can just call this document whatever you want. And it'll basically be the exact image that you see here. So for some of you, that may be something that you want to do. I'll leave that entirely up to you, but I want to show you the benefit of working with the passes versus just exporting the document, okay? All right, so now let's go back into our render menu. I'm going to come down here to where you see anti-aliasing. Let's expand that. These are the default settings, and here's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to just go ahead and crank everything up to the max. So edge is going to be 100, size or sample size, we're going to put that to 8, and super sample size, we're going to put up to 4, okay? What that's essentially going to do is when I have these renders done, when I export the mask, it's going to be a nice, clean cutout of my model. And that's dependent on the sampling size here. So I need all of this stuff to be cranked up so I get the cleanest possible alpha mask that I can get, okay? So let's go ahead and render this out once more with those new settings. Okay, sweet. So now what I'm going to do is start exporting this image here. Let's go ahead and go to render. I'm going to first select the shaded image, and we'll name this Dobby Render 1. You want to be really clean with the naming scheme here just to give you clarity on what each image is. Let's select this one, and this is going to be, what did I do here? This is going to be Dobby Mask, or I'm sorry, Depth 1, because that was the depth mask. Now we're going to go to the shadow, select it, and let's call this Dobby Shadow 1. And to be even more better about this, you know, some of you may actually want to do multiple camera renders. So right now I'm just doing custom, just one camera. Some of you might want to do another one. If that's the case, make sure that when you're exporting these images, that you're actually naming it appropriately to that camera. So for example, when I exported my render image, I could have called it Davi underscore, then the camera name underscore, then the actual component, which in this case render. Now I'm exporting my mask. So let's go over here and just name this mask. Okay. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go into Photoshop. Let me stop share for a second. And I'm going to stop the recording and show you what we're going to do in Photoshop with this. Okay.